They still coming in?
They're still coming in, but you can get started.
Oh, you meant now. Okay. I was waiting 1 minute per your earlier instruction. All right, y'all, we're getting it together. Hello, hello, hello. I am Terry Hughes with the Center for Nonprofit Management, and so happy to see this exciting group of people here today. We are going to have a courageous conversation and really see what we can unpack today. So we're thrilled that you're here. Let me just remind you, if you're not talking, please mute yourself. And you can send questions or resources to Catherine or myself in the chat. Hillary's also monitoring. And also feel free to update your name, if you will, to include your organization and your pronouns, if you will. We also encourage you to connect with your peers. So if you would like to add your LinkedIn URL to the chat, there'll be much connection after the event, which will be great. As you can see, we are recording this session, and any events and resources that are presented today will also be included in the follow-up email tomorrow, as well as the recording. So before we start with today's topic, I'm going to give you a couple news updates from CNM. We are planning to be closed, taking a much needed break from the 23rd of December. We will be back on in business on January 3rd. So if you're interested in 2022 CNM membership and have questions, please check during that time. Please check out the link in the chat for membership frequently asked questions, or email our membership team, and they'll be glad to help you with your renewal. And you can learn more about that. Hillary just put a link in the chat. Also, exciting news, our first quarter workshops are up on the website. So our education manager, Miriam Reed, hit her deadline and got those things all posted. So we've got some really exciting offerings in the first quarter, and a few that will be in person at CNM again. So yay, it'll be wonderful to see you all. So let's get on to today's topics. Today's topic. As uncomfortable as this topic may be for many of us that are here today, it's a very necessary discussion that we all have an opportunity to learn and grow from. According to a recent study by McKinsey & Company, racially diverse teams outperform non-diverse ones by 35%. While it's great to see more diversity represented, there's a lack of authenticity that has not gone unnoticed often. As a leader who's passionate about creating meaningful change in our sector, I often struggle to find the right words to properly advocate for marginalized communities, despite the powerful feelings in my heart. I want us to be better, and I know we can be better. So today, as allies, we have an opportunity to unveil and address racism in our sector, in the nonprofit sector. We hope that you will all leave inspired on how you can embed equity into your mission, engage in collective transformation, and lead your team into a broader and inclusive future. So before we introduce our four amazing panelists, I want to take a moment to welcome back our amazing moderator, Dawn Stone, who serves as Director of Community Impact and Equity Initiatives. And I'm welcoming her back because she's just been on vacation and she is back from the beach. Beyond Dawn's many years as a CNM facilitator, consultant, and now full-time employee as I said, Director of Community Impact and Equity Initiatives, we are just thrilled with the work that Dawn is doing. She's the founder and owner of The Conflict Chick, and she has 22 years of public speaking experience, an MBA in marketing, an MA in conflict management. She's equipped to lead organizations into stronger corporate cultures and improve processes through education and training. Dawn, thank you so much for all your efforts to organize and lead this crucial conversation. And again, welcome back from your vacation. Thanks for coming back. Last week I thought maybe I would never see you again after you facilitated the session from the beach, but we're thrilled to have you back. So I'll turn it over to you, Dawn Stone.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you all for being here. I'm so excited that we are here. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. I am back from Cabo, but I will be going again soon. So I am incredibly excited about this event today. And I want to go ahead and jump right in because we want to be able to leave time for you and others to ask questions. And what I will do is go ahead and tell you, if you are interested in submitting a question, go ahead and do that at any point in time. Put it in the chat. We have our chat monitors watching, and we'll insert those questions as they come up. So we thank you again for being here. First, I'd like to introduce you to Yuri Cunza, who has served as the president and CEO of the Nashville area Hispanic Chamber of Commerce since 2009. And he is the founder and editor-in-chief of the Spanish language newspaper, La Noticia. Goodness darn, I just came back, you can't tell. Yuri is a Hispanic American media professional, a social entrepreneur, a business leader, and a community advocate. Additionally, he is the founder of Y&K Strategic Media Solutions, a support and consulting services company based here in Nashville, Tennessee. Yuri, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Dr. Corbette Doyle, who serves as the Senior Lecturer of Leadership and Organizational Performance at Peabody College within Vanderbilt University. Her areas of expertise are diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in the workplace, women's leadership, evidence-based management, strategic workforce planning and analytics, and talent development. Prior to joining Vanderbilt's faculty in 2008, Dr. Corbette was the chair of the healthcare industry practice and reported to the CEO as the Global Chief Diversity Officer of Aaron PLC. She has served on over a dozen corporate, nonprofit, and or advisory boards. We are so pleased to have you here today, Dr. Corbette.
Thank you, Dawn. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Third, I would like to introduce you to Nakisha Hicks. She is Vice President of Human Resources and Inclusion at the Nashville Symphony and owner of the Elevate Her LLC. She is a career coach and veteran human resource executive who partners with women to guide them in their careers by assisting, equipping, and strengthening them to discover their own potential. In addition to this work, Nakisha has also partnered with various educational and community outreach programs to provide job readiness services, as well as assist organizations in developing diverse and inclusive hiring practices. Nakisha, I can't wait to hear your thoughts. Welcome.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Yes. Last but certainly not least, please welcome a longtime CNM consultant, Jody Lentz. Since 2004, Jody has worked with hundreds of clients to develop and support high performance, low drama cultures, in addition to working in the corporate, government, educational sectors, and has engaged dozens of community benefit organizations in strategic thinking and planning, innovation, and leadership programs. Jody's particular area of interest in this sector is collective or community impact and the high level of trust, patience, and tenacity required to navigate meaningful systems change. Jody, we are honored to have your wisdom and expertise represented here on our panel today, and welcome, native Nashvilleian.
Thanks, Dawn. It's always a pleasure to hang out with smart people.
Love it, love it. Please help me welcome these talented leaders who represent the heart of Nashville's nonprofit sector. And as a reminder, if you have any questions, please place those in the group chat and we'll do our very best to get them answered. Shall we begin? All right, I'm gonna jump right in. I do have pen and paper, so whenever I'm looking down, I'm adding. So the way that I like to open these questions up is to just ask them and use the popcorn method. So any of you can jump in. And I also want to remind us all to be lean in our expression, because what we want to do is provide time for those who are with us to ask those very burning questions, those last 15 or 20 minutes of the call. All right, first, in the last few years, how have you seen nonprofits evolve their organizational practices to limit or reduce tokenism? And are there any noteworthy or encouraging examples you could share? Who would like to go?
Oh, the silence is deafening.
You know what? Nobody, the pool party doesn't start till somebody jumps in the pool. So Corbette, did you want to go or would you rather me go?
I would love to have you go first, Keisha, and then I'll follow.
Okay. This is an awesome question when it comes to tokenism. And I think that it's one that is necessary. Even in my own role, I'll give my own experience. I am one of the only African-American folks on leadership, senior leadership in my organization. Initially, when I came into the role, that was the conversation that I had during my interview. I would not want to be a token in this organization, but rather my presence in this organization was one to show that we were actually making strides towards being more inclusive and actually doing the things that we needed to do in order to walk out the mission and the vision and to live out the whole notion that we wanted to be representative of the community in which we served. So I will say that for the Nashville Symphony, we have made some great strides in that respect. Even in changing up how we've even recruited musicians or how we're going about our auditioning processes, as well as just looking at staff and how we're doing things to intentionally diversify our candidate pools. So we are doing more and more of those types of things from a tokenism standpoint. And I'll pass it on.
And you know what, Keisha, let's take some time to get language, common language. So when we talk about tokenism, and I love that we're about to kick it off to the Dr. Doyle, who I love so much. Can we talk about tokenism from a definition standpoint and then jump into your examples?
So is that okay? Do you want me to address that? Yeah. Okay. So, just from a research standpoint, the notion of token is that when you have someone whose identity means that they are in a distinct minority in a group, others often look to that individual to represent the whole identity group that they belong to. And that puts a burden on the individual. One, none of us feel like we can speak for everyone who shares one or more of our identities. And second, it's a hot seat. And nobody wants to be intentionally put in that hot seat. So, that's the notion of what is a token from a research standpoint. Now, tokenism has come to take on many different connotations, many of them intentionally negative. From a research standpoint, the notion is not intentionality. The notion is just, this lack of awareness that you are putting someone in an uncomfortable position by asking them to represent an identity group, or by thinking that merely because you have one person from an identity group, that person can bring all the voices that are necessary and valued to the conversation. And I don't know if anybody wants to add to that definition. Yeah.
Yes, and I want to bring this up. Vic put in the chat, it would be great to hear some examples of tokenism that might go easily unrecognized by those who may not understand what tokenism is, or the undereducated leader, the one that's non-informed.
I don't want to be the only one to speak.
That's putting a little pressure on us.
Yeah.
Well, I would just jump in and say that within our organization, which is the Hispanic Chamber, and for those who do not know or not yet know, the organization is a little bit more over 21 years old. We represent small businesses, which are Hispanic businesses, but our organization doesn't restrict a membership to non-Hispanic firms. So that sometimes we get to ask if you have to be Hispanic to be a member, or if you get to speak Spanish to be part of the network. Which interesting questions, good to ask. No wrong question ever. We're also proud members of the Center for Nonprofit Management, so thank you for all you do. So for us, you can assume that would be a right assumption, primarily a Hispanic organization who has members of the board who are Hispanic, but not not only that, we have 51% Hispanic board representation within the group, and then the rest is not Hispanic. But the small operation we run, then it's all Hispanic. But my experience has been more being asked to serve on boards. And oftentimes I'm the only Hispanic there for many years. So I thought, well, look, we have more than 300 members here. Maybe somebody gets to ask, hey, would you like to recommend someone for a board? Which could be the natural thing after you get to know me or meet me and know that we're pretty active every week, every day. And that has happened sometimes, but many times have not. And even government doesn't have enough represented, even though we are, what is it? I think 16% of the national population now, according to the census numbers. I'm going to check in a second because I know we are almost 7% for the state of Tennessee, that's for sure. And well, thing is, it's hard to keep up with or dedicate some time to serve. And sometimes even though individuals may want to, may desire to, and may care about the mission of that organization, it's hard to fulfill the demands of board responsibilities. And maybe that's the reason why either people turn down, Hispanic people turn down belonging to nonprofit boards, or it means that nobody's asking. And I hope it's not the later.
Don, may I just reinforce one of the points that Yuri made? So one of the points you made in the beginning of your comments, Yuri, was that you are frequently asked to join boards. Just for everyone in the audience, a way that everyone has an opportunity to practice ally skills. Forget the term be an ally. An ally is not an identity, so it's ally skills. And so one way to practice ally skills is to share the wealth. So whether you were in the majority and you are frequently receiving requests to do something, or you are like Yuri and you are in a very visible position where many opportunities come your way, share that wealth and say, I really appreciate that offer. Great opportunity. I'm not able to do it, but I have a wonderful candidate for you. May I introduce you to so-and-so?
Great point. And just to follow up on that, and then I guess maybe make some sense of that, is that was a time back time which that happened. The population was growing. I don't know the reasons. I was very honest at I guess maybe I was naive, or I didn't know what was going behind the scenes. I wanted to participate, so I accepted. There was a time also in which I didn't know anymore which board I belonged to because it was too many. And I could not serve enough, so I realized that, and I wanted to be a good contributor to who I belong to. And then now, but I always say, would you like us to recommend if I get to be asked? And I know I cannot do it all, but still, I don't know what it is. Maybe certain people are more visible, like you said, and that is a good fit, and it will look better. It looks good and look better, but I think just so I don't have an answer for that. So to me, it's like, well, I'd like to see an improvement myself as well.
Very good points. Very good points. And we had another question that jumped up in the chat, and it was kind of worded in my list of questions. Let me go ahead and ask that. Could we address the opposite of tokenism with some examples of how nonprofits can change more than just the language? And let's talk about those behaviors.
Well, I'll jump in. These people are so smart, it's so intimidating. I'm furiously writing down over here everything I'm hearing. So, but I think, Noah, you asked a great question. And I think that what we've got to move away from is the sort of check a box mentality of the way the boards, oh, we're doing DEI, so we're going to check the box. We got Keisha on the board, and so we're good. We're ready to go. And I think, Keisha, you brought up a great point of, when you're asked to be in that room, to be explicit about, I'm not here just for you to check your box. I'm here to be a leader, and I think kind of claim that your agency in that is a powerful strategy for making sure that you or not tokenized in that. Anybody is not tokenized in that,
Can I jump in here?
please.
I think it's important, Jody, thank you for bringing that up. I think it's important that as folks in marginalized backgrounds, that term I just kind of cringe at sometimes, but those that look like me and others, right? I will tell you, be very intentional about claiming the fact that you are not a token, right? Because it is very easy to be tokenized, maybe even indirectly, right? For example, when the situation happened with Mr. Floyd, it was very easy for me to be turned to explain the Black experience in the workplace, right? And so, you know, at that time, did I feel like it was a bit of my responsibility to educate those that did not look like me in my workplace? A little bit, because of my loyalty to my organization. However, it goes back to that pressure upon me then to show up and to educate on the distinct differences in workplaces and just the distinct differences that folks have in life, period. So I would say that if you are that marginalized person, if you are not the minority, be very vocal with it. I mean, you don't have to take any position, right? And you certainly don't have to be treated any kind of way. And especially if organizations are going to be touting about being fair and equitable in practices, I think then you demand that respect, you know, so to speak. So I think it's perfectly fine. And like I said, I was very vocal on the front end, like, I am not doing this because we know the Symphony is not all that diverse. We were making great strides, but I wanted to make sure that point was really strictly enforced.
Dawn, may I add to Keisha's comment?
Yes.
So just combining Keisha's comments with this notion of what's a token. You know, a token is when you have a distinct minority of the identity group. One way for organizations to address that is the opposite of what I see many organizations do. They try to, and this crosses organizational contexts, they try to recruit a person who looks different in every group. And so that individual who looks different is always and only. Instead, cluster your hires so that people are no longer a token in the work group that they are part of, because they aren't and only in that group. There are shared voices. They don't carry the burden in that department, that function, that context. And that is not what I see organizations doing, but I think it is one of the easiest ways to make everyone feel more comfortable, because they can look around their work group and their team and see people who they can identify with.
And we're talking about people of color, I hope, because I mean, I'm imagining how hard it is to relate to someone that you're not. And so to one Hispanic in a board, there is 20 people or more sometimes. It's really, I mean, I'm looking at the issues that people are facing, the mission of the organization that I need to serve. What role do I play there to have some say when I'm seeing the benefit of the whole community? And then on top of that, being Hispanic, not being exactly what you would think is the cause of the friction between communities of colors in this town or in this city, which is a more apparently a black and white situation. Sometimes I thought, well, I'm second here in relevancy, because there are the harder issues that need to be addressed with the Black community that need to take priority, because if that's what we're trying to be diverse, equitable, and inclusive. And I'm citing here, you can imagine where I'm citing to, even though the pressure of the majority may be overwhelming, I know what is fair, because whatever happens to anybody reflects or will impact of anyone too, or us, or me, yeah, or my community as well.
Excellent. Thank you. We've had a lot of good resources. I want to point everyone to the chat. You will get a copy of this video, which will also include the chat. So you'll have access to all the books, the questions, and as you will know, or some of you might know if you've ever been in one of my sessions, you will have more than enough resources to point you to things. So we will include things like white supremacy, proximity, understanding the language associated with the things we're talking about. If you look at your screen right now and you did a full gallery, you will see exactly what Yuri, Dr. Doyle, Keisha, and Jody are talking about. You know, being representative of one group sometimes narrows us. And I think I saw that come up with Miriam in the space, and really being narrow-minded. Noah also talked about a lot of that, and Lowell just shared some things with us. So let me get to the next question, because this is on fire. And apparently, Terry, I'm gonna put this out there. For 2022, we will have more of these intentional conversations, because as the conflict chick, I'm all about it. Bring it to me. Everything you need and want. We are going to talk about it. And that's why I'm here. So next question. Meaningful change takes time, and many nonprofits are small, making it difficult to show progress in the short term. How can nonprofits communicate meaningful efforts to improve DEIB, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, in the short term? What types of actions and levels of transparency might be valued by the communities they serve? And I want you to think from a community standpoint, because oftentimes we sit in our towers and we tell people this is the framework, this is the model, when the experts are the ones we are serving, and those who've been in the field for a mighty long time that look like Yuri, Keisha, and Dawn. So I want y'all to jump in. Who wants that question? I'll put it in the chat so everyone can follow along.
You know, one thing that I often say is this work is crock pot work. This is not microwave work.
Yeah.
So I say this all the time, right? I think that for organizations, nonprofits specifically, the budgets of all sizes, I think budget doesn't matter, right? I think it's effort oftentimes. For example, for us, when the tornado hit back in March of 2020, yes, we could have got on the bandwagon and, you know, did the whole deal with just our local little downtown community, right? But it was important for me to really be partnering with those boots on the ground in North Nashville that really didn't look like necessarily the people that were on our stage or in our audience, right? Why? Because again, it goes to our mission of wanting to change the perception of the symphony to make it more accessible to all communities. Well, then how do you do that? Then you also reach out and you help all communities, not just those that have the dollar, so to speak, to spend on a ticket. And so what we did was a lot of work, firsthand work with a lot of donations and just working with Gideon's Army, for example, partnering with other organizations to make sure that we had a pronounced impression in North Nashville during that time. And it wasn't just, I think sometimes what happens with nonprofits is we'll partner with organizations to make it look like we're doing things. But I think it comes back to a gut check on, are we really partnering with these organizations, these other organizations, as a way of really solidifying that these are the moves that we are really trying to make as we're adding ingredients to our crock pot, so to speak.
May I add to that? So I love that, Keisha, and I wrote down the crock pot and microwave. That's fabulous. That is so perfect. But to your point, partnerships are a valuable way to help an organization move in a more equitable and inclusive direction. But what I encourage all organizations to do, you know, when you have a crisis, you know, Keisha identified a response to a crisis. When you're responding to a crisis and you don't have a plan ahead of time, you know, you need to think strategically, which is what Keisha really identified. But ideally, what every organization that the people on this call represent need to be pushing their organization to do is to think strategically about why they want to be more diverse and inclusive. Why is it important? What is the problem that needs to be addressed? And then come up with a concrete strategy for how you are going to address that. And so what role might partnerships play in that? To be reactive, to just go out and establish partnerships with organizations who will sound lovely on your website is what someone else called the theater of diversity. That's making it look like you are doing things. If you're really going to do them, you need a very thoughtful strategy, concrete actions, desired outcomes from each of those actions, and a way to measure what's happening from them. That's how you make progress. And if you're doing that in a really thoughtful way, you can be transparent about the plan. You can be transparent about what you are holding your organization accountable to achieve. So I'll shut up.
I do want to bring, those are some very good points. Thank you all. I want to bring up a couple of the things I'm seeing in the chat, and I'm going to read verbatim because, and Jerissa, I'm going to get to your question because, yeah. All right. So Lau said, white folks have to do the work if things are going to change, not as a guilt trip, but to better understand how racism has been embedded in our societal systems intentionally. I think that's the doggone truth. What else do we have here? Catherine, I'm clicking through. I need to get Jarissa's question. So please go back up and find that for me. Because that question is
I've got it. I've got
okay.
it, John. How can we hold organizations accountable? We don't want to fall into the checkbox scenario. However, how can we ensure that organizations continue to be led by just and inclusive culture policies? That's from Jerissa.
Thank you, Terry.
I think first and foremost, you got to do the work to establish these policies, right? And there has to be, and these can't be unicorn policies like that make us look and smell really good, right? They have to be realistic policies. This is what you get. Okay, this is what you get in the afternoon, y'all. But they have to be realistic policies that your organization can in fact utilize and move through, right? But I think also there has to be some accountability in place. There has to be some sort of metrics in place. And quite honestly, sometimes there has to be a third set of eyes external to your organization that can help you to navigate that. Because sometimes when you're so in the weeds with your organization, it's hard for you to see kind of what's possible. Because you're looking at the lens of right now versus the lens of what could be. So I think that's a way to start it.
Great point. Anyone else want to add on this? Because
Yeah, I will amen that, Keisha, and tie it back to what Corbette was talking about before. And without the why of your belonging initiative, I love that you've thrown in some Brene Brown with that, Corbette, although you've probably been using that for years. If you're not there with the why, everything else is just performative. I mean, you can hold me accountable and it's just the numbers. It's not pointing towards anything. And exactly like you said, Corbette, you've got to make diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And justice is all, it's like any other sort of business discipline that you've got to have. You have a goal, you're here, you want to get to here, let's kind of figure out the steps to get there. It's not magic, and it's hard because it's new for a lot of people, but it's the way that you've got to do. You got to identify the why, figure out what your end state is going to be, and just make the motion towards that. And you're also talking about kind of transparency of your plan. Where are you going with this? So that you're able to talk about milestones, I guess, instead of metrics. This is a hard thing to measure with a chart or a scale. But the stories, I think, are important. The milestones that you hit to get to where you want to get to. But again, you've got to have an idea of what the end game is, or you are in just check the box mentality.
One thing I would just add in terms of the metrics, and I'm going to take it back to a comment that Keisha made about realism. And so one of the things that I encounter with organizations is that they get very excited about the opportunity and they come up with a plan where they are going to, in 3 years, they're going to increase the diversity of their workforce by 40%. Meanwhile, they have a turnover of 2 or 3 people a year. I said, you have to step back and you have to take a look at, how many people do you have? How big is the organization? How much movement do you have? And what's possible? And then, and so that's really a key part of what I was talking about, Jody, is that people get over optimistic and they too often do not take a step back and say, what can actually be accomplished? What are the opportunities for change? And if we're successful 75% of the time, what would the numbers look like? If we're only successful only 50% of the time, what do they look like? And so that's getting realistic rather than making these huge promises that are not possible for you. Many, some of the not-for-profits represented on this call are huge with large workforce, but many are not. So you've got to be realistic, which was really the point Keisha made that I wanted to emphasize.
Hey, Yuri, do you have very good? Thank you all, Yuri, Jody, and Dr. Doyle and Keisha. Yuri, do you have something to add in this space? Because the next conversation is going to go back to the chat, plus my third question for the group around funding and a white male leadership and what we need to do.
Well, just the conversation made me think about this often interest in being diverse within the workforce that I hear. And I wonder, why is it so hard? And I wonder if perhaps I could recommend that I think it helps when individuals who are in that role that can make a change or make an impact also take the time to enhance their understanding of things beyond their own circles or their own identity. And unless unless you try to get familiar with what it is beyond that, it's going to be very hard to bring that into where you are or the world that you're leading. So it's an exercise of also enhancing and becoming more educated with real immersion. It's just not going to work reading or seeing a PowerPoint. That's good, but it's not enough.
Absolutely, Yuri. It is not enough. So, wow, here come the big heavy hitters. So Noah, my twin in the chat, has brought up a couple of points, a couple of things. Speaking to funders about the language, speaking to funders about dialogue and versus a monologue. Has to be a dialogue. So my next question is, white men are in positions to control a disproportionate amount, a share of the charitable dollars. How, if at all, does this influence nonprofit decisions, and what can we do about it? And I'm going to give you the data behind it because Noah knew. Whiteness of the nonprofit space. The Mid-South compensation report shows that 62% are white and only 35% are Black. That's a 2-to-1 ratio. And is that really reflective if we look at the business in general and those that we serve? So who would like to take that?
All right, I'll jump again. Here we go. Right. I will say, you know what? It's funny. I had this conversation actually with my CEO, because we were talking about why is it so hard for us to recruit, right? With the Nashville Symphony. And I told him, quite frankly, because it doesn't look, anybody I've talked to that looks like me doesn't want to work there because the place doesn't look like me, right? There's no representation. And even in my career coaching cap, oftentimes what I tell a lot of my clients is go look at the leadership. What does leadership say, right? And so when you're looking at leadership, it does throw off recruiting, right? So, I mean, by just default, then who else do you have to choose from, right? If you can't get folks of color in these roles because they don't feel like these roles are accessible to them or they're comfortable in these roles, who else would fill these roles? That's one thing. Second thing is, I think when it comes from a nonprofit standpoint, think about where the money, follow the money. Where is the money coming from? Largely enough, the money is coming from white, rich donors, These are not coming from, a lot of this is not Black donors, right? Or folks of color. So who's in positions of power? The person with the check, the person with the money. And who's the person with the money? They don't look like me. So I think that also influences leadership decisions in a lot of nonprofits. So how do you change that? You got to follow the money, and you got to change up how things look, in your organizations. Like, how are you, what is your outward perception? And I think that's the thing that now nonprofits have to do, is they have to think about what is the outward perception and I mean, it's little things like when somebody goes to your website, what does somebody see? What does that make them even want to click and see anything else? So it's outward perception as well.
Well, just saying
Yuri?
that, yeah, just wishing and hoping for and talking about what could be better. I'm not so optimistic is going to change. It's good, but it has to be heard from others, from those who have that power or the influence to, especially those that are given. And they need to also perhaps be informed or educated on this. Sometimes I see groups that will hire one person of color or a person that may be identified as with a stereotype, of course, right? And then that person gets to do like 3-4 different jobs. So there's overwork to go and show that, oh yeah, we have a Gonzalez here, a Lopez, or a Gutierrez. My last name and my first name, my first name is Russian, so I don't know if you think of it ever, but I get you more confused with that. But it's something is expected from certain roles, and so it's very complicated. But I think leaders have that opportunity to bring about the necessary change or influence for the better, so things are diversified to a point that it's just natural. It is not, of course, you have to be intentional about that change, but after that, it's going to be easier because you're not going to see people and think about certain stereotypes. You may, I hope you never had to face the doubt of, is this person Black enough or Hispanic enough or XYZ enough for a role, right? I don't care if it's white or whatever color. I just care that the person understands and gets it and knows that there are certain things that are necessary and are important and we all matter. That was important.
Good
Don,
point.
may I?
Go ahead. I was just
Yeah.
going to read. Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to pick up on the part of your question that Keisha talked about in the end of her comments, and that was, the donors. And so, and Terry, posted some statistics in the chat on the donors. And so, one of the issues that I encounter with not-for-profits that I've worked with that are focused on trying to improve the diversity of their workforce is the cost. So, one of the issues with many not-for-profits, and, Keisha, I would put the Symphony in this category and that's tangential just because the arts is a field where people are passionate about the arts, and many people who go into not-for-profit can afford to work at a not-for-profit. So in general, not-for-profits have salaries given the skill set and the competencies. They don't pay as much. And so that makes it harder to recruit a diverse workforce, particularly in the environment we're in now, where organizations are saying, oh man, I've got to improve my diversity. Who can I go hire? And so there's, the competition is heightened. So one of the problems I see from a philanthropy and a donor standpoint is this donor fixation on overhead. Well, your staff is part of your overhead. And I think that one of the key issues that we have to address in order for not-for-profits to be better positioned to fulfill their mission, which is going to require a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive workforce, is to make a compelling case to donors that spending more on overhead, including improving, the staffing component, will lift the mission and better enable the not-for-profit to meet its mission. And you need data for that.
Yes, we have a lot of great stuff in the chat, and I know we're getting short on time. So Terry, we will have to have more conversations here. But I wanted to point out, if you get a chance, go to Candace Robinson's post where she states that the end game, a backwards design model or approach to change makes sense. Organizations must state beyond mere desires to be diverse, equitable, and inclusive. I think that is so key, because a lot of times, even with the Floyd and all of the murders that we've had noticed during pandemic, which have been here for hundreds of years, now it's like, oh my goodness, what do we do? And now people are running to go and grab a person of color and throw them into a DEI space. And so, as we've stated here, that is not the thing to do, right? We need to be a lot more intentional. But as we talk about being intentional with people of color, let me ask this question. How can nonprofits intentionally balance the wage disparity between people of color and their white counterparts in this nonprofit space?
So we can stop using the word nonprofit. I warned you, Dawn, I was going to go off on my riff about the term nonprofit. It is maybe the least useful, least descriptive way to talk about what all the people on this call do. Community benefit organization does not roll off the tongue nearly as smoothly as nonprofit, but also nonprofit is a lame description of a tax status, not representative of what y'all are really all about. Okay, off the soapbox. What was the question again, Dawn? Sorry.
How can community benefit organizations intentionally balance the wage disparities between people of color and their white counterparts?
Well, first we got to talk about what kind of money people are making, because that is the last great taboo in American business organizations, is talking about what kind of money people make. So being explicit about that removes the mystery. So we have some idea of how to balance that out. So first, I mean, just like we were talking about before, you got to define where we are and then define where we want to get to, and then figure out what the trajectory of that change looks like. But to Corbette's point, it's my government and corporate clients are fighting hard to get all of the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging that they can right now, and they are leveling up their pay to attract the right kind of people from people who don't typically look like them. And Keisha, to your point, some of them are having a really hard time because they're recruiting folks into highly skilled, driven, great people who walk into the all-white organization like, y'all checking the box, or am I really here? And so I think that's one of the big challenges they've got on top of the wage disparity.
So that sense of inclusion, absolutely, Jody. And, I know when I was doing a lot of work in Chicago is a big city. Nashville's grown quite a bit, but Chicago's a really big city. And I'm telling you, when it came to, in particular, the Black and the Latinx communities, it was a very small world, and they knew exactly. It was very easy for people to find out which organizations do you want to work for and which ones do you want to stay away from. And so I don't think people realize that their reputation is critical if they truly want a more diverse workforce. They better have a more inclusive workforce first. Workplace, yeah. I should say.
And even from an internal perspective, right? So we're talking, I think, more so bringing folks in from an external perspective, but even internally, I think that this is where I put my HR hat on, right? I think that there has to be some sort of equity analysis that goes on internally with positions. I've seen that, in my own organization where we've had folks, and I'm sitting here like, I'm not signing off on this because this person has this type of title, looks a certain kind of way, regardless of what the intention was. We know from a legal perspective, intent versus impact, right? We want to make sure that we're doing the right thing by people. especially when it's not, thousands and thousands of dollars difference. But I think internally, we have to have those equitable wage conversations, and we have to be able to look at things and say, you know what, if this person is a manager and this person is a manager, all things are equal, what is the pay like? And how can we create equity here from a pay perspective? I think even more so than bringing folks on the outside. I think it's also equity when you're talking about wage disparities. It's also promotable opportunities. As promotions increase in organizations, how are we preparing those that are in positions to be ready to succeed into higher level positions, right? Oftentimes coaching dollars, things like that, are spent on high performing folks, which are generally their leadership folks, which are generally not folks of color, right? And so as a result, what happens is those folks seem to be elevated much easier than those that are not. So it's like, what then do you do? That is also a way to decrease that disparity, if you will. So I think it's how are we investing professional development dollars in these folks? So that's my stance. Jody, I'm gonna step off my soapbox on that.
You get an amen from me, sister. That's good.
All right, that was a very good questions. Now, my last question is very loaded, and I know I have just a few minutes, so I want you to kind of think about what this means to you and how we can answer this in preparation for our next discussion. We are going to carry this into 2022. And even if it can't be a part of this type of conversation, we will have them in our community conversations that happen on Fridays, twice a month from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m., where we have 10 affinity groups here at CNM addressing these at a very intentional level. So we have everything from LGBTQIA+ to Asia Pacific. We have veterans, we have justice involved individuals, what we call, well, those are, yeah. Thank you, Laura. So wonderful. So my last question, let me go ahead and do the conflict check. Okay, so how can we, and this is one you don't know, how can we prevent more harm? Because what I'm finding in this nonprofit benefit space is that a lot of people who are woke are still inflicting harm upon our Black and Brown and Native and Indigenous communities. So how can we, call to action, prevent the additional harm? And sometimes it's unknowing by not helping the folks. So let's talk about that. How can we and our agencies prevent additional harm? Because like Keisha said, she may have been brought in for one thing and we come in and say, hey, I'm not your token here. I do X, Y, and Z, and this is what I'm here to do. I do the same thing at CNM. Being a native, I said, I'm coming in because I'm from Nashville. It's my hood. I grew up where people didn't want to be, and now it's all the biz because of gentrification. So I talk about affordable housing and all those things. So I want to know what it is that we can do as a sector to prevent additional harm, primarily at the hands of those who are woke and leading these organizations.
Think before you speak, right? I think that's huge right there, right? First of all, before you speak on what it is that you're going to do in your organizations, before you speak about who you are, think about it first. Think about it, and can you live up to it? So think before you speak. That's my first thing, and I'm gonna sit down on that one. But that's the thing for me. Think before you speak.
Thank you, that was excellent. Who else?
I'd say to manage expectations. To you're talking about before. Don't put a bunch of stuff out there that's unrealistic. That is, terrific that you've got that aspiration, but manage people's expectations around that, and keep it real about what you are actually doing in that process.
Thank you, Jody. That is so key. Dr. Doyle.
I would say from a leadership standpoint, make sure you are committed as a leader to whatever you say you are committed to, and carry that throughout the organization. And so no false commitments. It's execution. It's not rocket science. It's hard work, but it's Yeah.
Dr. Doyle, yeah, that's why I asked the question. I knew I didn't have to ask. Yuri.
Well, the world is changing and things are more visible through means that were not available years past, a decade or so, maybe more than that ago. So you get to know what's happening, and then it becomes a huge scandal, things that people do that probably was very common for them to do in the past against people, just either talking to people or acting in a particular matter. So I think the conversation about what all of this means needs to be always important as you deal with anyone else at the workplace, in a way that we all become familiar with that, and it's not a taboo thing that it's hard to talk about. And then, like, coming into this conversation, are we going to be able to actually say the things that we want to say, or for someone like me that is not I guess I do not reflect what the majority might be, just because where I was born, because of an accent, because of what I do, and the stereotypes that are associated with people based on how they identify themselves. It's not easy to come and just disrupt everything or just say things that may, because you also want to fit in. But we're beyond that time. We need to take some action and be vocal, be open, be nice about it, because understanding that it's not going to happen overnight, but whatever the seed you plant today will bring you fruit at some point. So thank you. I think it's a great exercise of how we can actually make improvements and change things just because we are discussing this in a safe environment. And even if it's unsafe, as long as we don't get to say things that are hurtful to others, or are intended to be so, just be honest and sincere. I think we'll move forward.
Excellent. Thank you so very much. There's so much in this chat that is rich. I know I have to turn it over because my time is well spent.
Can I take
Yes,
2
Dr.
seconds? One thing, can you share the chat with everyone? So those of us who are speaking, it was hard to see the chat, and there were so many things I wanted to see. And the second, in case people are interested, I asked right before the session, one of my doctoral students is the executive director of a choral group in the South, did his whole course project on improving diversity and inclusion in the group. It's an evidence-based action plan, and he said I could share it. So if that's of interest to share, I will send it to you, Dawn.
Yeah, that would be great. I would love to include that in the resources that Catherine will send out. And so I thank you all for being open to these conversations. This is the one of many. I have 27 community conversations next year. So if Terry doesn't get you, look for emails from me. Yes, I am that chick. And I'm going to turn it over to Terry. Thank you so much. We'll close everyone out.
Thank you so much, Dawn. Thank you, Yuri, Corbette, Keisha, Jody. You guys brought such a richness to the conversation. And I have to also say thank you to everybody who was here. I mean, Noah, Lowell, Robin, Carissa, so many people just really brought a lot of richness and depth to the conversation. You will get an email tomorrow with the recording, which will include the chat. Catherine will assemble all the links so that they'll be easy to click on and get. So we are so appreciative that you were here today. Clearly, this is something we need to do more of. So we will, our next town hall conversation is on January 27th. And we will let you know what the topic is. It was not going to be this again, but maybe it needs to be. So we are nimble here at CNM, and we are looking forward to 2022. I wish you all very, very beautiful, joyful, peaceful holidays. And thank you so much. Dawn, thank you for your leadership. Absolutely fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ditto. It was, yes.
You will have everyone's contact information, so you'll be able to reach out to all of us. I am open for coffee and Zoom. Should you have additional conversations or need to have resources, those of you who are specifically in minority leadership positions, please contact me. We got a lot of stuff coming up in 2022 that I want you aware of. Yuri, you and I will have coffee shortly. Jody, we got a schedule for January, and Dr. Doyle, I will be in your chair under your feet And
Love it.
Keisha, hey, I'll see you on.
I saw some
Wednesday,
students on the
30
call, so yeah.
All right. Thank you guys so
Thank you
much.
all.
Thank
Good
you,
to see you,
everyone.
Matt. Bye, Jerissa. Bye, Alina. Bye, Mary. Bye, Noah. Bye,
Thank you all.
Michael. Bye, everyone.